I'm going to go to a question that I know a number of VTubers have.
Yeah.
And Giga, you might not be want to be the one to ask this question, or you might, but
Okay.
I will go ahead and ask the question that I know many
Mhm.
VTubers have and then answer it because I know it's one that's on many VTubers' mind. Is the whole question about our enforcement guidelines and
Mm.
when we publish the enforcement guidelines, the attire guidelines, and in particular the comparison to VR chat. Okay. And
Yes,
in
I
terms
was
of
gonna
what our
ask.
guidelines are. Okay, good.
Yeah.
Good. Oh, well, why you can feel free to why don't you go ahead and
Yeah.
ask, but I wanted to go ahead and ask the way you would ask it then.
Of course. I think, I mean, I was definitely going to say it nicely because I think a lot of it comes from just confusion, people not being sure what the guidelines are, who they apply to. Maybe they're looking for more clarity. Some people are just complaining. Some people are more validly complaining. There's a lot of different ranges on that. But overall, a lot of VTubers are confused about the outfit policy. They'll think maybe it means one thing, and then they get their model made, which, takes like 6 months to a year sometimes, and then they debut it
Right.
that day, and then they're told that's not allowed actually, right? So there's a lot of uncertainty on what is and isn't allowed, and then why, like you said, why can a VR chat avatar look a certain way, but then this person who's using a model that they also use in VR chat not allowed to stream a video game with that or chatting, that
Yeah.
sort of thing.
Yeah. First, let me, yeah, and I think this is a good question. In fact, some of this I'll also throw out there is because
Mhm.
you highlight one of the problems that exist here that doesn't happen in the real world that I'd love for us to find a better solution for. So, first of all, when we published the enforcement guidelines, there was no change to our policy.
Right.
In fact, part of what we were trying to do was sometimes people have to implicitly figure out what the policy is by talking to people that have endorsements. And what we were trying to do was to be clear about how we were, and we didn't change how we were enforcing it all around then. But of course, as we do it, that also then brings more attention to something that was already happening in terms of enforcements. Okay. But we didn't change anything with the enforcement guidelines. Now, our general policy is that we apply the same attire guidelines to a VTuber as we do to a person in terms of the clothing that they have on their body, in terms of covering their hips and everything else. And now I'm not going to go into talking through the nuances of the attire policy for humans because first of all, I'm not the expert on all the nuances of enforcing the attire policy on humans. It's also something that is nuanced and you have to be very careful on, and we've tried to communicate what is our attire policy for humans. And so the same thing applies to VTubers. Now, the big question is, well, wait, why is that when you don't have the same policy with VR chat? And then, in fact, shouldn't VTubing just be like VR chat? And I understand why VTubers avoid that. Seems unfair. They can have that, avatar in VR chat, but I can't have it as I'm a VTuber. The reason for the difference is, and you highlighted earlier about how VTubers do everything on our site. VR chat, if VR chat is a game and VR chat has a rating in the game, and when people go to VR chat, they have certain expectations about the type of content that they are going to be exposed to in terms of the avatars that they may see. Now, of course, VR chat is just an environment, and VR chat can all be lollipops and bubblegum and unicorns, or VR chat can be, less attire for their avatars and all sorts of things. However, it is the fact that much of especially since when you're in VR chat, you have no idea who you might run into. It's certainly the case that as you go and watch somebody streaming in VR chat, you've learned a given expectation about what you might see in terms of VR chat. And we, of course, use the game ratings and other things to make sure that users are aware of that. That is not the case with a VTuber because a VTuber can play Minecraft, right? A VTuber can do anything. And so there, when you have less attire, for some people, they might find that may not be what they are looking for when they are going into a Minecraft stream. And especially given we have people of all ages, it's not just an age thing, but it is the fact that we have people of all ages, not of all ages, of 13 and above on Twitch. And you do want to think differently when somebody's under 18. But there's also lots of users of all sorts of ages. That's like, no, that's just not what I want to be exposed to in terms of, I'll say less attire. And so
Mhm.
that's the reason we kind of need to treat VTubing different than VR chat because of the very nature of it. And interestingly in this, like, I think these lines are going to continue to blur where more and more in gaming, you're going to have control over your avatar in gaming. Okay. And you'll have
GTA.
more and more expressibility. In
Yeah.
GTA 6, Lord knows what you'll be able to do in your avatar in
It's going to
GTA 6.
question those things, and we might have to continue to adapt our policy to like
Right.
see how things go, but that is where we're
Right.
currently standing with it, which is like your VR model, we are comparing to a person, because like a person, which you are, you can change games, you can change categories, you can do all these different things, but when you're in a game, that's a game model. So we consider them separate.
So can I ask two follow-up questions on that? Because I get what you're saying, Dan. Completely agree, right?
Yeah.
Because at least when you're playing certain games, you have certain labeling and things, which I assume has a lot to do with advertisers and a lot of these other things, like just knowing, you know, what's going on the platform. Let's say, now I don't do this, you can see I'm covered head to toe, but let's say I wanted to get an outfit that was more revealing. I know, for example, I can go into the pools, beaches, hot tubs category and show it off there. What if I wanted to just be like that all the time? Could I, in the future, maybe consider having some sort of label or content classification that lets me do that, so that let's say people want to filter that out and it's not fully adult content, for example, but I know the nature of this outfit is what it is, and I want to just click a button and say, I want to do anything and be in any category doing this, but I'm not trying to be shown to, you know, the minors that might be on the site.
Right.
Would there be a way to kind of meet in the middle there?
I think so. By the way, you talked about the two different ways of doing this. One is labeling and the other is a category.
Yes.
Those have different pros and cons, and sometimes we do both, right? You know, in other words, so for example, with the attire exception, right, for a human, you need to be in the hot tubs category, and that is applied. And now some people may not want to be in the hot tubs category, but they want to use the attire exception. And it's like, no, sorry, if you want to use the attire exception, you need to be in the hot tub category. And it's not just labeling it, okay? The tricky, by the way, and I think thinking of something like that is certainly something that we, you know, can be thinking of and are, and trying to figure out how to handle this. One of the challenges that we face is, as we do certain things, sometimes people find ways to exploit it to an extreme. And the best example is when we made the change in terms of drawing and allow to use the human figure. And then art suddenly became dominated with a certain amount of content. And I will tell you, the thing that in general doesn't work great on Twitch is what I will call hybrid categories that have two very different use cases. And ASMR is an example of one such category. That ASMR has like two very different communities that kind of use ASMR and an audience that is different, but it's all within one category. Okay. So that's my one hesitancy about just labeling, because then it can create certain categories might become where 50% of the content in that category is labeled. And now you create what is a hybrid category in terms of the audience that it's serving. Whereas hot tubs, it's better because if you take hot tubs versus ASMR, hot tubs is not as much of a hybrid category because there are not a lot of people that are just streaming in hot tubs just because they happen to be hanging out in a hot tub and that's what they're just doing for the day. But I think that idea
like
is
it's
definitely
managing expectations, really, is what you're pointing out, right? Like, just that makes sense to me.
And here's
we also just have like a world of like gamers, and they're min-maxing understandably what we put out there because they are looking for ways to still express themselves but stay within our terms of service. I get that. Generally, what we want to try to avoid though is having such specificity in our rules that people are looking for ways to circumvent them, as opposed to what we really want, which is make sure that when you are expressing what you want to do, that your audience knows what they're in for. Don't tell me that you're Sailor Moon when you're gushing over magical girls. We can tell.
Right.
And by the way, that goes to, in general, whenever you have something that is sort of a little bit subjective in terms of the line, this is one thing that I see in chat a lot, thinking, oh, it's inconsistent. Okay. Well, another way to talk about consistency, suppose I had a black piece of paper and a white piece of paper, and I asked 100 people, is it black or white? Everyone will give me the same answers. Now, suppose I had chartreuse versus pick another color that is very close to chartreuse that many people may not really fully have a model of, violet versus purple, right? Which are two different colors. To be honest, I can't tell you the difference between violet versus purple. And if I asked a bunch of people, is it violet or purple? That in fact, you'd have a lot of people that get it wrong. And that's because the difference between violet and purple is very small, okay? And especially as you start talking about these things in terms of attire, sexual content, that sort of thing, it can be very subjective. And so in fact, as people try to move up to the boundary to get something as purple as possible, but still be violet, okay, let's assume for a second, purple's not allowed, but violet is. But they want to be as close to purple without being it. You're going to have a lot of people that are going to call it purple, and then you're going to have some purple stuff that the rater's going to call violet because it is not clear. And so what then ends up happening is you can find examples. Look, here's this violet thing, and they said it was purple, but this person was purple and they said it was violet. Oh my gosh. Okay. And the answer is that is the nature of this problem when you have highly subjective things, whereas in other areas, it's not highly subjective. Frequently in terms of, hate speech, it's pretty clear this person said this like horrendous thing.
Right.
And so I encourage people, if you're trying to get as close to the line without going over the line, and then sometimes you get caught for going over the line when technically you can say, but I wasn't over the line. And this person, I'm like, stop trying to live so close to the line. Okay. Now you did highlight a problem that VTubing has that does not happen in people is if somebody is figuring out their attire and they find out because they get a warning about their attire, will they put on a different top tomorrow?
Yeah.
Okay. And that's easy. Okay. For VTubers, since it takes time to spend to get your model and get the attire for your model and all that, it's like, well, shoot, I just spent a fair amount of money on this. Okay. And I wish I would have known this in advance. I wouldn't have spent the money. I would love if we had some way to kind of help with 2D models or other things, kind of make an assessment, and that may also be the type of thing that maybe VTubers help us with this, right? That in fact, you would get a group of VTubers that, we work with, and then maybe something happens that in the VTuber Creator Club is VTubers, like you can almost like, it's borderline. And if it's borderline,
I was actually going to suggest that in the Creator Club. Yeah.
So we actually do that in our ambassador group, and we have VTubers that represent the ambassador selection. There's going to be more about this soon, but we really want to utilize our ambassadors as a way to help us get perspective from various creators. And ambassadors are meant to get sources because nobody's a monolith. So our ambassadors absolutely should be going to the creator clubs, getting broad understandings of like what those intricacies are, and then bringing that to us so that we can make better decisions for trust and safety. So we are absolutely doing that. I'm sorry. I wish I could like unveil this right now, but I can't. We're going to talk about it probably. And I think in our open letter, we'll be talking about some of this stuff.
Good.
For sure.
All right. Well, Mary, you know what
we
should do?
have to get to our Q&A, Dan.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. So GEEGA, this has been great.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming. And looking forward, we should do a stream together sometime, whether it's in my VTuber character or not. So maybe
we need VTuber Dan back. We need him back.
Yeah, I know. All right. Thanks, GEEGA.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.